G'day there, ladies and gents of the internet. I am the Braveheart Aussie and welcome to another journey in world building video. Last time we explored the concept of the Merchants of the Coalition, one of the more ubiquitous factions across the Dark Diaspora, embodying the dangerous excesses of unrestricted mercantile capitalism. Today, however, we are shifting tact and are focusing on the second faction that I alluded to in the last video, the Tarvan Covenant. For what the Coalition is to trade and economics in the Diaspora, the Covenant is to religion. Religion has always played an incredibly important role in the colonial endeavours of countries on Earth, and it would be remiss if the desperate adventures of humanity as part of the scattering did not itself include some religious flavour. First off, let's talk about the religions of Earth. In short, they are no more, lost along with the vast majority of humanity in the fires of destruction. Without the source text and original locations, any remnants of the religions of Earth that did survive war and impact would have ultimately been destroyed by the fragmentation and isolation of the remnants of humanity through the scattering. This invariably created a void in which all manner of superstitions and cults originally percolated across the isolated and disparate settlements of the Diaspora. However, it wasn't until several centuries after the scattering that the mantle of a true interstellar religion was finally claimed. Enter the Tarvan Covenant. Now, there is a huge amount of detail one can go into when examining and creating a religion from scratch. I'm not intending to cover all of that in today's episode. Instead, I'm just going to try and keep this to the basics. Simply, the Covenant is a post-apocalyptic cult of contrition. They believe that the Madagascar impact was divine retribution by the creator of the universe, in here quote-unquote God, for over 30 years of destruction, murder and sin associated with the War of Cataclysm, along with the general degradation of society in the many decades prior. Their faith is reinforced by the reality of the universe itself, which seems almost malevolent in the frequency by which it pushes the remnant of humanity to the edge of demise. The Covenant has placed the blame on near extinction of humanity on humanity itself, and believes that only through true acceptance and contrition of the inherent guilt that all human beings have for those sins of the past, can one as an individual, community, or even wider species hope to survive in an otherwise unforgiving universe. Now, this has some pretty obvious parallels with the concept of original sin in Christianity, in which Adam eating the apple and their banishment from the Garden of Eden, referred to as the fall, is the original sin that all people carry and must atone for through baptism. In this case, the Covenant view the fall of humanity, what I'm calling the demise, as the righteous and justified reaction of a God to a sinful humanity, and that if all people do not show sufficient remorse, regret and contrition through their words and deeds, then worse fates will still be in store in our future. I'm drawing heavily here from several sources of non-traditional religion creation and world building in the media. One example is the faith concept within the Frostpunk game series. In Frostpunk, faith is one of the two main ways in which one can influence your population's hope and discontent. The faith religion in that game focuses on balancing the desire of people for hope in their lives to help them get through the unimaginable task of surviving a post-apocalyptic global winter in a steampunk environment, with the opportunities for righteous cruelty through executions and the use of fear to drive down discontent. In this case, I can absolutely see the Covenant using fear, pain and torture as a way of instilling religious devotion and societal contrition. For some in the Covenant, this may be done out of a sense of power over others, while others may have well and truly drunk the Kool-Aid of religious fervor and fully believe and embrace this religious righteousness. For the former, this opens up opportunities for corruptions, with senior members of the Covenant striking backroom political deals with colony leaders to leverage the influence of the religion for power and financial gain. This also introduces an element of inherent injustice into the religion, where those with money and power are able to circumvent the punishments and righteous sentencing imposed upon the everyday person. On the other hand, those with more religious fervour might view their attempts to proselytise colonies and settlements as something of a divine calling, and do so in a manner not unlike the Spanish Inquisition or the Holy Crusades. This opens up even further opportunities for different factions within the Covenant, pursuing different goals potentially even within the same societies. It also opens up different reasons for potential rebellions against the Covenant, rebellions that might be met with harsh repercussions as the Covenant seeks to maintain its preeminent position within the Diaspora, either for power's purpose or to save the very souls of humanity. In terms of structure, I see the Covenant having two main positions, deacons and novices. The deacons represent the most senior members of the Covenant, responsible for its overall administration on the planet Tarven, and acting effectively as bishops and archbishops of the religion on more established planets in the Diaspora. Novices alternatively represent the journeymen of the religion, and would be the ones primarily responsible for proselytizing the religion across the galaxy. This would recognise the fact that many of the settlements have never had any exposure to the religion before, and the form of this proselytizing would be heavily influenced by the natural inclinations of the novices themselves. Some would take a more traditional missionary-based approach and embed themselves in the community, acting something like preachers. Others may, however, take a more zealot-like approach and seek to use fear and violence to impose the authority of the Covenant on all spiritual matters within society. One thing that I would like to touch on before we finish up today is that of where the religion is located, that of the planet of Tarven. I envisage a planet of a broken landscape, filled with jagged rocks and elevated cliffs, with deep crevices crisscrossing the landscape. And at the bottom of these crevices would be a maelstrom of churning lava and heat, creating a contrast between a burning hell and a somewhat desolate reality. To support this landscape, Tarven is a moon, possessing an atmosphere but is otherwise inhospitable for life. The landscape would be borne out because of the tidal stresses of the moon orbiting its large gas giant, which would dominate the skies. I also imagine that the sun barely rises in the skies, either blocked out by the planet or because of the distance from the star, causing the entire moon to be in twilight at all times. And before we finish, let me flag a few other concepts and ideas that hopefully we will explore in more detail in the future. Religious taxes are widespread and will represent another financial impost on the otherwise destitute people of the galaxy. I would also argue that there is a lot of tension, or even at least just a mixed relationship between the Covenant and the major regional powers within the Diaspora. Those powers would be somewhat dependent on the Covenant for maintaining societal stability through the religious order. But on the other hand, the Covenant's priorities are very much at odds with the desire for progress. One of the criticisms that will be laid against that of the Covenant is that they are intentionally suppressing the economic and social development of different settlements and colonies across the galaxy, maintaining the population at subsistence levels in order to maximize their subservience and adherence to the Covenant religion. I can also see that the Covenant has its own military forces, or at least has fleets of ships, some which would be used to provide aid or proselytize and provide support to colonies and settlements, and the other used as a weapon to inflict fear and punishment on those who break the Covenant's dictates. These would be something of a white fleet and a red fleet, and seeing a ship enter from the Covenant into your atmosphere, how you react would ultimately depend on the colour that those ships' flag would fly. The final thing I'll mention is I really would like to add in a grimdark element of sacrifices to this religion. This wouldn't necessarily always be imposed sacrifices or involuntary sacrifices, though there would absolutely be circumstances in which that takes place, not dissimilar to what happens in the 40k universe for psychers to support the otherwise dead emperor. But I also see that people would be so wrapped up in the religious fervour of the Covenant, particularly people from backwater settlements and colonies who have nothing else in their lives and who are willing to make the ultimate sacrifice to alleviate the sins of their worlds. I could imagine this would take place on colonies in the form of immolation, where the fires of old Earth are replicated on one's own body. But I could also see this happening on Tarven, where apostates, overwhelmed with their devotion to the religion, take themselves up to the tallest cliff in the broken landscape of the planet and hurl themselves off into the fiery magma below, not dissimilar to the way that the Madagascar impact asteroid came crashing through the atmosphere to strike Earth itself. I want this element of self-sacrifice to hang over the religion of the Covenant, something of a Damocles blade that's always there in the background. And that is where we're going to leave today. Again, covered off on a huge amount and a lot more to cover off in terms of who founded the religion, what are the religious books, what are some of the key messages, what is the relationship between the Covenant and the other major powers, including the merchants of the Coalition. One of the things I really love about world building is the fact that there is no definitive end. We can add more and more to these concepts as we go along, and absolutely will do so, particularly as we flesh out some of the settings going forward into the future. Just a reminder, go and check out my Patreon account. We have 3 of the lore cards have now been produced and are up there ready to go. If you want to support me on Patreon and at the levels that get you access to those cards, definitely go and check that out. The link is in the description below. And that is it for today. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and may the journey continue. Hey!